Whoa.
A gunshot.
It's just like what do you call it, when they have the in New York, they ring the bell. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Public Safety Work Session of Monday, October 6, 2025. Today we have two topics on the agenda. An update on our agenda, it says the first is an update on the 911 Emergency Communication Center, and the second is an update on the police gang unit. We're going to need to reverse the order on that, and so we're going to have the update on the police gang unit first. And as we begin, I'd like to thank Ms. Farag for preparing the staff reports for the topics today, and for once again and always assembling a most informative packet for us. And unless the other committee members have any opening statements, I'm going to ask the first panel to please introduce themselves and ask if they have any opening comments. And then we're going to ask Ms. Farag to please lead us through the discussions. If you could, Chief, I guess we should start with you.
Mark Yamada, Chief of Police. I won't have any comments to start. We'll just jump into it.
Good morning, Darren Frank, Assistant Chief of Patrol.
Good morning, Ian Clark, Director of our Special Investigations Division.
Good morning. My name is Gabriel Carrera. I'm an Assistant State's Attorney with the Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office in the Gang Division.
Very good. Ms. Farag, please.
Sure. Good morning. The reason for this gang update today stems out of some discussions that the Public Safety Committee had during the spring for the recommended FY26 operating budget for the police department. Council staff had been tasked with identifying some reductions in all budgets. And for the police department, one of the reductions that I had identified was 6 vacant gang unit positions, understanding that it was a non-recommended reduction. However, they had been vacant for a significant length of time, and it was the least harmful impact that I could identify for the police department in order to achieve some savings. At the time, the chief, and I don't want to speak for him, he can clarify if I misrepresent his position. However, there had been several recent cases in February from Judge Chernovsky. I believe they were motions in limine, but don't quote me on that, but they were meant to exclude evidence of gang validation. And one of the things the judge required was that there be an additional level of review to substantiate gang validation for evidentiary purposes when it goes to prosecution with the state's attorney. So we have both a gang unit, we have Captain Clark here and Gabriel Carrera here from the Assistant State's Attorney's Office to better elucidate what has been happening in the gang unit, what types of resources they need, what their current steps are in terms of hiring, and what their forward-thinking plans are in terms of needs. So I'm going to turn it over to the department and Mr. Carrera to discuss more in detail what's going on.
Member Rita Montoya here is welcome, and thank you for joining us. And with that, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Public Safety Committee, for giving us an opportunity to provide an update on our gang units. We currently have 2 teams. The first team is our major offender gang team. It handles complex investigations and strategic intelligence, working closely with our federal partners as well as our local partners. And our gang investigation team, which focuses on proactive enforcement, intelligence gathering, and coordination across the department. Our major offender gang team is staffed with a sergeant, a corporal, and 2 detectives with 3 vacancies. Our gang investigative team is staffed with a sergeant, 5 MCPD detectives, and 1 Maryland Park Police detective. We did have multiple vacancies. We're down to 3, and as of yesterday, we just selected, when got transferred over to SID, 2 detectives that were selected from a position vacancy process earlier this year. These positions are funded by the Montgomery County government. We do not have any positions in our gang investigative teams that are funded by grants. However, we do have grant funding from the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, Maryland Crime Intel Network. This grant is shared between us and the state's attorney's office. The MSIM grant focuses on identifying, disrupting, and dismantling gangs and violent criminal networks involved in the distribution of illegal drugs, the use of firearms and crimes, violence and human trafficking, and other inherently violent criminal enterprises. This grant helps us enhance intelligence infrastructure, support investigations that identify and dismantle criminal networks, as well as maintain collaboration between partners for information sharing and enforcement. Let me emphasize, with our gang teams in our department, we do not do immigration enforcement. We do not do operations with ICE. I want that to be very clear.
Could you repeat that just one more time so we can?
We do not do immigration enforcement. We do not do operations with ICE. Thank you, Chair. I want to talk about some of our current challenges. The evolving gang dynamic and the age of social media. It's used to both intimidate and recruit, or both at the same time. Limited operational scope with our staffing challenges. The proactiveness of our gang unit can be challenged. We've lost experience through promotion over the years and one transfer to the U.S. Marshals Task Force, and more than cognizant of burnout with our detectives. They could be in court for weeks and on call all night long. Another challenge is the length of time for a gang validation summary, commonly called a gang packet. Gang validation summary can take several weeks. The goal of the summary is a comprehensive intelligent filing document with group name, monikers, members, associates, criminal patterns, social media activity, police contacts, and gang identifiers and territory. Recently, as Ms. Farag discussed, in February, there was a ruling that our gang validation summaries needed a peer review process. Since that ruling, we have done one, as required by the courts, where a detective did a validation summary. It was peer reviewed by another detective. And what we've done internally to ensure the highest quality of product and everybody's rights are protected, we've added a supervisor review. We've done one since this ruling. It's been turned over to the state's attorney for use in a criminal case. However, it has not been introduced into court yet for that case was continued. I want to talk a little bit about our crime trends that we've seen over the last few years, reference gangs. From 2023 to 2024, gang-related crimes stayed pretty consistent. The top three violent crimes in 23 were weapons offenses, homicides, and assaults. It was in 2024, it was homicides, weapon offenses, and assaults also. And so far this year, assaults again, weapons offenses, and homicide. The year-to-date data is only up to October and hasn't obviously been finalized because we're still in the calendar year. Other crimes also have been attributed to gang activity to include but not limited to non-contact shootings, robberies, and vandalism. In Montgomery County, we currently have 19 validated gangs. The number is likely higher because these are the validated ones. It's like the rate of theft from stores is higher than what's actually reported. The highest level of gang activity that affects our communities is the 6th District, 5th District, 3rd, and 4th. And the other thing to keep in mind is gang activity is cyclical. These officers, these detectives need to be ready to be called out at any time. It goes in lulls and cycles. I want to say we have an outstanding working relationship with our partners at the State's Attorney's Office. In preparation for a prosecution, one detective can spend over 200 hours in meetings, analysis, file review, and other investigative means, as well as that validation summary, which I just discussed, and then ultimately a trial. So I'll turn it over now to ASA Carrera to discuss the courtroom for February and the commitment of our detectives from the perspective of the State's Attorney's Office.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. From the perspective of our office, I'm on a team that has one chief, that's Teresa Casafranca, and two other members besides myself. We are basically tasked with handling any gang-related, gang-associated, or gang-specific cases that come through or are charged in Montgomery County. And the majority of those cases that we handle are the ones that Captain Clark just testified to: homicides, weapon offenses, assaults. Through the past year or so, we have been working. Since I've been on the team for 3 years, we've worked closely with the gang investigations team, and to say that their work is necessary would be an absolute understatement. And the amount of time and the amount of things that we rely on them is very, very important. From everything from gathering intelligence when we don't know in the early stages of an investigation who did what, to, as Captain Clark testified to earlier, the need of a gang expert at trial, and the amount of time that goes into preparing for testimony, working through motions in limine, being there side by side with us as the trial is going on. It's something that I can't imagine doing this job without. The opinion that happened earlier this year was in a case handled by Ms. Casafranca and I. It's the allegations of an MS-13 homicide that occurred right on the 3D line at Prince George's County. And basically, this is an alleged MS-13 homicide. And in order to prove cases under 9804, which is participation in a criminal organization, one of the elements is knowing participation in a gang and committing these offenses for the purpose or in the direction of a gang member. And the allegations in this case for the two co-defendants that we had earlier this year was that they were directed by higher-ups in MS-13 to commit a killing in the woods. And that was only 2 of 5 co-defendants that we had in this case, including jury selection. The case took approximately 5.5 weeks. One of the defendants was convicted of all counts. The other defendant the jury hung. So we'll be retrying him the following year. We still have 2 other co-defendants, the individuals who directed those killings, coming up in February of this year. But we had multiple day-long hearings on motions in limine as to the admissibility of the gang expert in the case. The gang expert created validation packets for each individual in the case that identified them as being a validated member for various reasons that you've all had to review prior to the hearing today. And basically, Judge Chernovsky ruled that that portion of his testimony would be inadmissible because it lacked peer review, which led to certain possible errors of testing the evidence. And we've been working nonstop to try to add to that process to make sure that is a useful tool that we can use going forward. And we don't use them in every case, but we use them in a lot of cases. In this particular case, we had the benefit of a cooperator, which helped on the defendant who was convicted of all counts. But to say that we would be able to proceed on other cases without a cooperator would be almost impossible, because right now, as it stands, at least in regards to trying a case in front of Judge Chernovsky, we can only have the gang experts testify generally to gang participation, identification, culture, background, and we have to tie the cases together on top of that. So peer review is essential. Peer review is one of the prongs that the court looks at in the Daubert-Roshkind standard, and we are working together again closely so we're able to get over the hump of getting this fully admissible, and I think it's extremely important for our office and our ability to prosecute these cases going forward.
Thank you.
And to follow up with that, when our detectives are in trial, they are in trial for potentially weeks at a time on top of their normal job duties. Speaking of our detectives and our vacancies, so 1 corporal and 6 detectives. And as I said, just as of yesterday, we filled 2 spots. Our bureau, our investigative services bureau, just went through a comprehensive workload analysis. That analysis is not public yet, and I have not seen it. But that being said, in talking with Assistant Chief Parker Lone and Chief Yamada, looking at the department as a whole, the goal obviously is to fill these positions. Absolutely, and the need is there. But we're also down approximately 190 officers, and I understand that. So it's balancing the needs of the department as a whole. However, we do have a class graduating in December, and they'll be operational independently around March. And that's when the discussion can happen that, hey, chiefs, we just graduated 25. Can we look at filling 1 or 2 more positions? And then we have another class starting in December, I believe. They'll graduate in the summer. They'll be fully operational in the fall. So we have this pattern balancing the needs of the department with trying to fill these positions, and it's going to take a little bit of time. Oh, and on top of that, when we're talking about gangs and gang-related activity, it is not just a police function. It is a partnership with the state's attorney, Montgomery County Public Schools, HHS, Street Outreach Network. It really takes a whole team. NIJ, National Institutes of Justice, Gang Center created a 4-pronged approach that we follow, and it's with prevention, intervention, education, and enforcement. I can give you an example that we did a training with MCPS last year for all the security employees on gang identification and what to look for, and potentially having that intervention at the school level. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? If not, we're going to turn to Ms. Farag. Good? Ms. Farag, please.
So both the state's attorney and the police department have gone through most of the salient items within the packet. I had put a few questions at the end, which they had also answered a few of them. One of the overarching things that I'm looking at, which might be better answered at the staffing update in November, which I believe is November 3rd, is how do the vacancies in the ISB or the Investigative Services Bureau, including this gang unit, interplay with what's needed in patrol as well, since patrol is obviously the largest piece of police work. But it would be helpful to understand better what the exact assessment is within the gang unit of how many positions are needed. And again, we may not know that until November. I'm happy to answer any questions about the packet you have. I think they have, the peer review process, is this done by a fellow officer or is it done by a supervisor? And what happens if the two individuals within the police department disagree on gang validation is one question I was hoping to get clarified.
Sure, thank you, Ms. Frog. So the initial validation summary is done by a detective, sworn officer. The peer review is done by another detective, sworn officer. And we've added our own layer of accountability by having a supervisor also review that validation. If there is conflict between the two detectives, the original investigator and the peer review investigator, that is brought to the supervisor. The supervisor calls a meeting and makes a determination of what information is included or what information is excluded.
Thank you. Go ahead, please,
Yeah,
Chief.
if I could just speak to the how we fill the PVAs, any PVA that we have position vacancy announcement that we have, whether it's in ISB or elsewhere, it's not something we do on a whim. It's not without thought. There's a lot of purposeful meetings that the assistant chiefs and I have where these openings are discussed. Unfortunately, every time we fill something, especially if it's a vacancy in ISB, the Investigative Services Bureau, that has to come typically from Darren's bureau, which is our patrol services. And he will tell you, we are critically low. We have been critically low. So anytime we fill one, it is not without great discussion. And I asked for the assistant chief sort of come to an agreement. There's a lot of tense.
He's smiling. He is
Yeah.
smiling.
There's a lot of tense. Well, see, because he was on the other side of the fence not
That's
too long
okay.
ago.
He knows that his work.
So it's interesting, the conversations that we have. But I'd love to have enough officers to fill all the positions, but unfortunately, we just don't. So.
And candidly, we would love for you to have them as well. It's not something that we're pleased about. Trying our best to help, but not something we're pleased about. Go ahead, please.
The only thing I wanted to add to what the chief said, and we smile because unfortunately it's the only thing you can do when you have
Yeah,
the situation
you
you
can do.
have, right? But to his point about the thoughtful discussion that goes into it, so one of the things to remember, especially when we get into because I used to be a major crimes captain, used to be an investigator, our gang detectives are highly trained. And so it's not as if they're not there to do the work, it's not as if we can just go out and pay someone overtime to do it. The only thing about patrol that we have going is we have a lot of motivated officers that can always revert back to their initial training and do the work of a patrol officer. And that's how we're getting by, and that's the things that the chief takes into consideration, again, when he turns to me or any of the assistant chiefs in the meeting, we give our input, and we give very candid input. Mine is always, we can't fill that. But he's got bigger concerns, and I think we do strike a good balance. Thank you.
Very fair. This whole issue, I think it's been 20-some years ago that you talked about that the gang, the one case was on the border of Prince George's County and Montgomery County. It was 20-some years ago that I was on the task force when I was, I guess, on the council or mayor. I guess it was mayor of Gaithersburg at that point, for a Prince George's County, Montgomery County task force on gangs. And the prevention, intervention, and suppression was part of that discussion. And whoever said it is a partnership that has to solve this. I mean, the recreational department, you can start in every part of the government. that we need to do what we can do to really turn this around. And at times it has been, and at times it's gotten worse. I remember at that task force, we were in Prince George's County in a high school, and mothers were holding up pictures of their sons who were murdered by other gang members. I mean, it was pretty eye-opening, to say the least. Not to say that we didn't have some idea that this was going on, but it was tough. It was very, very tough. But people came together and it got better, and of course it gets worse. And it's so necessary that we have the expertise to make sure that what we're saying, if someone to make certain that we know for certain, we're saying that in the federal government at this point, but somebody's saying, well, that's a person's a gang member, and maybe they're not. I mean, we have to make certain, and if they are, then we need to be dealing with them as severely as necessary. But we need to make sure, and so I think this is discussing resources. We need to make sure that the police and the state's attorney and the public in general has the resources necessary to do the job, to make sure that what we're doing is the way that it should be being done. So I guess November, Ms. Frog, is when we get an update on this, and I'm going to wait for that as far as what we need and what we have and what we don't have. But I think that's where we need to be, and I think that and I understand about the whole idea that we're down 190 officers. There's certain things that we can't afford not to do, and Chief, you and I know, excuse me, the assistant chiefs work right along with you, but there's certain things we can't afford not to do, and therefore it's like a blanket. You pull up one end, what are we doing on the other end? And we have to make sure that everything is going to work together. So with that, I'll turn to my colleagues. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Thank you for this overview. In regards to the court case, I just wanted to make sure that I understand.
Oh, I just did that.
That's all right. We'll let it
Yeah. That wasn't by design, but go ahead. Just on inept, but go ahead.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it's the judge. Oh.
It's not.
It's not going to be that scandalous. All right. Okay, thanks. Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, the judge in this case, or over these, looking at these cases, was applying the, I don't know how to pronounce it, the Daubert standard, Daubert standard, okay, which lays out a handful of guidelines, a handful of factors for the judge to consider as to whether to accept the expert testimony. And obviously, I think we all agree that it's important that we want to make sure that what we're producing is being done with fidelity, so that we don't, so that we provide good information, that we don't waste all the staff time, et cetera. And when it gets in front of the judge, we want to make sure that it gets through. So I just wanted to better understand how we are adapting in light of the judge's recommendations or concerns. So I understand that we have the additional staff person to conduct an additional level of peer review of the findings in that case. But there are a number of other concerns that the judge had noted in alignment with the Daubert standard. So one of them is, well, did the judge, well, let me just go through and ask. Okay, so one of them is whether the technique or the theory being used can be tested and assessed for reliability. And the judge's concern was that the technique or theory cannot. So are we changing the methodology that we're using in this case?
I'll try to answer your question. So Judge Chernovsky did, in her order, mention very different, several of the issues that were applied to the failure to meet the standard under her opinion. And a lot of them are very related to one another. And we believe that with the peer review, it would allow the court to be able to judge whether something can be tested, a technique can be tested, because you're having a peer review isn't just someone looking over your work. A peer review is someone going into everything that the individual that validated one of these alleged gang members reviewed to reach an independent conclusion, and that independent conclusion would also be tested by the fact that a supervisor would do the same thing, and if there is a conflict, there would be a determination made as a group at the meeting that was described by Captain Clark to further be able to go through that. When we presented it to the court earlier this year, because this was more of a novel issue, I would say, I think, in my opinion, Judge Chernovsky's order went as to the point that you brought up, is that it can't be tested because it's not subject to oversight at this point. And I think that's just one of the several methods that the gang team, in my understanding, has added to the process to hopefully get over the hump instead of being in the exact place that we're at right now.
Okay, so I'm just going to read, thank you for that, from the case. From Judge Chernovsky, unjustifiably, under the standard of being unjustifiably extrapolated from an accepted premise to an unfounded conclusion. The premise itself is the first problem here, in that these criteria do not have to mean that someone is in a gang. Many of the criteria have alternate explanations that were not considered. The tool does not address how to incorporate alternative explanations in assessing gang membership. There is no way to tell the accuracy of the results to decide if they are reliable. So it sounds like certainly part of the concerns, at least, is related to the tool itself. And so applying, having multiple people use the same tool, I don't think it would necessarily address those concerns. Are we changing the tool?
So my understanding is that everything is being looked at. On the state's attorney's side, we've been reaching out to other partners in the area, whether it be state's attorney's office from other counties, federal, and comparing them to one another. I can't speak directly about what the gang investigations team is doing on their side outside of what they've already testified to. But I really do believe that one of the issues that's rooted in this analysis is that I think Judge Chernovsky was ordering and opining that because it's one individual making one determination based on one process, she did not find it to be reliable, and that's why it couldn't be admissible at trial. Having said that, just to compare, one thing that she brought up is that one of the cited opinions in this case, Ingersoll versus State, the gang expert admissibility that was admissible in that case had a different way of validating someone, in that it applied different amount of points to different particular levels of like self-admission was worth 5 points, or being arrested with someone is worth 2 points. So it changed the values, and then instead of just looking for 2 points to validate someone, they look for a total amount of points over a range. And I think that's something that we've discussed, but it's not something that's as easy to put into place as having someone fully review, go over, maybe argue, and come up with a different conclusion as someone, and this is a peer and colleague who is also, at least I would consider them an expert. And we're really trying to do the best we can to conform with the requirements in Judge Chernovsky's order. So as we go forward, we can keep sort of attacking these cases to the best of our ability.
Okay, so maybe this is a question for MCPD about whether we're changing the standards used. So as discussed in, I'm not sure how to pronounce this name either, but Yaki Del Cid, CID. But the case that I was reading from before, then the judge noted the typical use of our tool, which is that if out of this list of 8, if one criterion is met, then a person can be marked as a gang associate. And if 2 criteria are met, then they can be marked as a gang member. They do not necessarily have to be. So that's where the subjectivity that we've been talking about comes into play, and where peer review could potentially be helpful there, since there is such an application of subjectivity. And so, yeah, there are some jurisdictions, and maybe it sounds like in the case of Ingersoll, if that was also if that was also an MCPD unit that was applying no, it was not. Okay. So yeah, there are certainly other jurisdictions that use a point system but have different weights to the values. And there's some questions around those as well. But you can see that there is some thought being applied in that way. But are we still using a system in which we have 8 points and a checklist of 8, and if 1 is met, then they could be marked as an associate, and if 2 are met, they could be marked as a gang member?
So yes and no. It's much more complex than that. As I testified earlier, since this court ruling, we've done a gang validation summary, and the total process itself took a couple weeks, or several weeks. So just meeting 2 criteria, my detectives in our department would rather side on the side of caution. Just because somebody meets 1 criteria does not necessarily mean they're an associate, and just because they meet 2 of these criteria doesn't mean they're a gang member. That's the minimum requirements, but it's
Right.
much more complex than that.
Right. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that that's still
Absolutely.
that they could be, depending on, and obviously, I'm sure that I don't doubt that the team is putting in significantly more time than are they wearing a sweatshirt of this brand, check the box, obviously. But that is where the subjectivity comes into play. And if it's only a 1 point or a 2 point criteria, then that means that subjectivity has a wider breadth than, say, if there's a 5 point criteria, it's set as a minimum, for example, as we see in some other jurisdictions. Okay, so we are still using those minimums.
Yes.
So I have to say, I'm concerned that it sounds like, well, the subjectivity that can be addressed to some extent with the peer review of the findings does not address significant other concerns that are raised here, and so, if that have to do with maintaining the same system, because I want to make sure, obviously, that we are able to get our findings through court. And so again, to be clear, the system itself has not changed at all. It's solely as is reflected in the packet. And from what I understand in front of us, we have 2 separate people who are using the same process. That's the one change.
The process, yes, has changed. So you have an initial validation process, you have a peer review with another detective, and then we, as an agency, as special investigations, have added that other layer of review by the supervisor.
So it's 3 people who are going to do the same. So it's 2 people do the analysis using the same system before, and then 1 person who looks over the findings. But the same basic system is in place.
The same 8-point validation
The same 8
process.
point. Yeah. Okay. Well, I have significant concerns on this because, again, as I look through the judge's remarks, most of it to me, as I'm reading this, does not have to do with whether or not there's a peer review. There's questions about the database and how data there is kept. There is, the judge had concerns about every one of the Daubert standard bullet points here, and it's not sounding to me like we are addressing all of them. The known or potential rate of error of the technique or theory, the existence and maintenance of standards and controls, whether the technique or theory has been generally accepted in the scientific community. And then the peer review, also the question of the peer review is not just in reference to the findings themselves, but it's also in reference to whether the technique or theory being applied has been peer reviewed. And so obviously this is, the peer review that's being applied here doesn't address that. Do we have any concerns about the fact that it sounds like the majority of the judge's concerns here related to the Daubert standard have not been addressed? I realize that, the judge is also allowed some discretion and that the Daubert standard can be applied. They could decide to, different judges could potentially make different decisions here. It's not that all of the Daubert guidelines must be met here. So are we just kind of rolling the dice and hoping that, the next judges are going to, even though we've only addressed this one narrow slice of the concerns, that the upcoming judges, the next judges will accept the testimony?
Well, it's ultimately up to the judge, whatever judge is presiding over a case, to accept or not accept expert testimony. I don't feel like we're rolling the dice when we've done this validation process and we've added the peer review, and we've added that extra level of scrutiny from the supervisor. I'm confident that this first case with the validation summary that goes in front of the judge will be accepted, as well as the expert testimony.
I would say the questions that you're asking really just highlight what we're dealing with. Again, these orders came down right before trial in March of this year. We're doing everything that we can to respond to those orders. One of the things that we could immediately do was add peer review and add the additional layer that Captain Clark has testified to. But this is a process that has been used for years. This is a process that's been used for intelligence. This is a process that's been used with assistance with the state's attorney's office in attempts to prosecute these cases. And I think it would be discrediting Judge Chernovsky's opinion if we just tried to insert new things immediately. These are things that need to be tested. We're arguing that it's a scientific method that should be reliable, that needs to be admissible in court, and without a careful examination of the procedure going forward, we won't be able to address every single concern, and we can't just throw things, out there. I do understand what you're saying. The reason why it hasn't been completely turned around is because we believe in the process and we believe that it is a good process, but we do understand the concerns that were cited by Judge Chernovsky. But it's not something that can change overnight. And I think that just highlights the man hours that are required, not only from the gang investigation team, from the Special Investigations Division, but also in cooperation with our team in our office, because we have to look at the legal side of it, and they have to look at the way that they analyze and they maintain their experts on their end.
So am I understanding that there is some analysis being done on changing or updating the system itself, or not?
I can only speak from our perspective. In our perspective, we've had discussions and again are trying to figure out how these are used in other jurisdictions where it has been accepted. And we've actually haven't even been able to test it in our own jurisdiction outside of Judge Chernovsky, like you said. And I respect Judge Chernovsky's decision. It's an adversarial system. And I may not agree with the ultimate conclusion, but I think it's important for us to take that and do the best that we can with it. And we can only look at it from the perspective of, is there anything that we can suggest to the GIT to potentially look at or change? But we can't just fully direct them on how to do that portion of the process.
And council member, to your question, we're always analyzing what we do. This 8-point system was accepted by the Mid-Atlantic Gang Network Margin group many years ago. This standard has been accepted in Montgomery County courts for an extended period of time, which doesn't mean we don't continue to analyze and try to improve what we do, but this has been an accepted standard.
Okay, well, so it sounds like we're going to try to test this in front of other judges and see how that goes. I will note that I have significant concerns about the use of staffing to just basically be replicating something that I certainly understand the concerns that the judge has listed here, and even if we have been able to get it past other judges, I would think that we would want to make sure that we have the highest standards here. Then looking at the use of a point system in other jurisdictions, some don't use that, some don't use it for this purpose, but I haven't found another one where the point values are so low. 1 point could potentially be an affiliate, 2 points could potentially be a member. I've seen jurisdictions where reforms they decided that they needed reforms and they had like a 5-point minimum. So I have significant concerns. I'm glad to hear that you are thinking about other possibilities, and I would love to get some details about what that looks like. But yeah, I think that I have significant concerns about using additional staffing to basically do the same thing that we have several pages of the judge explaining why it's a concerning methodology. It's extremely important work, obviously, to be able to pull together this kind of information and make accurate assessments. And I think we're all agreed in that. But the question of whether this is the method that we should be using and how much effort we should be putting into making improvements on it, that seems like an important one as well. And I know DOCR, for example, has their own validation process when it comes to safe housing, et cetera. And I think that there's some similarities, but it's not exactly the same. And obviously that's for a very different but critical purpose as well. Do they use intelligence? I would assume, do they use intelligence from MCPD's gang validation process or assessment to inform their analysis? I'm not sure who that's the best question, or who the best person to direct that to is.
So DOCR does have their own gang process, because obviously you don't want two rival gang members in the same cell. Where they get their information from, I can't speak to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually cut on my own. Yes, please, Councilmember.
Thank you. So I know you mentioned that there are grants that help fund the work of the unit. They don't fund personnel expenses, right? So those grants through the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. It used to be Governor's Office of Crime, GOCAP. I'm just going to say GOCAP. GOCAP gives money for that, but those grants, do the criteria change every year for when you have to reapply for those grants?
So the grants are funded. The funding is determined on certain metrics: how many cases, how many prosecutions. So potentially the grant funding could be affected by less effectiveness because of staffing.
Right.
And I believe it comes on the fiscal year July 1st to June 30th.
Okay, so you already have your grant award for FY26 in hand, but you would need to be reapplying for FY27 grants through GOCAP, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned that social media is also playing a part in the work of the gangs these days in terms of intimidation and recruitment. Does having extra electronic evidence impact the overall time it takes to do the investigations and to prepare the cases for court?
Absolutely.
Right. And in terms of the validation summary and the 8-point summary, thank you for mentioning margin and their standards. And did you work with the state's attorney's office collaboratively to develop that process, since they're the ones who have to make that proffer in court?
I know our detectives do work collaboratively with the state's attorney's office on gang validation summaries that will be used in court. Absolutely.
Okay. But there was the charts you had about the numbers year over year for different classifications of gang-related crime. Were you classifying non-fatal shootings as assaults for purposes of that chart that was given to us?
I do not believe so.
Okay, so non-fatal shootings are not represented in that chart.
I do not believe so.
Okay. You mentioned the time it takes to put the cases together, of course, and then there's the trial itself. Expert witnesses are permitted to be present in the courtroom throughout the trial, correct?
Absolutely.
So unlike a fact witness who normally just has to wait outside or wait their turn, our expert witnesses on either the prosecution or defense side sit in the courtroom to take in all of the testimony, right?
Correct.
And the questioning of that witness can, in fact, rely upon the other things that they are hearing in the courtroom, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a significant amount of time, because these cases can take a week or so, right?
Oh, at least a couple weeks, several weeks. Absolutely.
Right. And you mentioned that they're still having to do their other work on top of that?
Yes. And when I talked with ASA Career about this presentation today, he was talking about the dedications of detectives. It's breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time.
Right.
And then from the police detective side, gang activity still occurs, after 5 o'clock,
Right.
midnight, 1 in the morning. The detectives are very busy. So yes, there are other functions outside of the 9 to 5 absolutely occur.
So when you're talking about the burnout that the folks
Yes.
working in this unit experience, do you think that impacts the willingness of members of the department to apply for these positions internally?
No. With our recent position vacancy announcement this past summer, we had 9 applicants, which was a good number of applicants. We're very happy with that.
Good. And in terms of Judge Chernovsky's ruling, that was just a ruling on a motion limine. There wasn't an appeal, correct?
That's correct. There was no appeal. That was a motion to eliminate prior, like a couple weeks before trial, and we proceeded with the gang expert being able to testify in a limited capacity after that point. I don't believe we've had anything directly come up since then, as we're trying to work on the system that with the concerns that Ms. Mink mentioned, and that's where we're at right now.
And you're not aware of any opinions issued by the Maryland Appellate Court applying the same reasoning as Judge Chernovsky to gang validation tools?
So the Ingersoll case that I testified about earlier is the most recent opinion to my knowledge. It's a reported opinion, and it goes through, I think, like the DOCR process. I can't remember exactly which area was validating the individual, but we used it in support of our motion,
Right.
our opposition in the motion.
Right, yes, the Ingersoll case came up in the motions in limine process in this, and it was relied upon by Judge Chernovsky in the ruling, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but it, as you noted, it wasn't a one-for-one match. It was closest to that could be applied, but it wasn't directly on a gang validation in a trial for the criminal conduct of the gang members, right?
That's correct. And I think just from listening to Judge Chernovsky, like when she would speak in court as opposed to just in the written opinion, I think she found that to be a better process. But like I testified before, I think actually applying a change like that is not something that can be done overnight. It needs to be something that needs to be further considered. And I think based on this very, pointed and serious findings by Judge Chernovsky, it's not something we want to just try to flip over, but we want to take the best attempt that we can, best thoughtful attempt that we can do to change the process so we can meet the goals of police, state's attorney's office, everyone in this room.
No, I personally don't think there's any harm in being more robust in the proffer that you're making to accept the expert witness testimony on behalf for the gang validation. It's just a question of it isn't thus far outside of Judge Chernovsky's ruling. It has not been definitively ruled by the Maryland Supreme Court that a particular change must be made, correct?
That's correct, and it's been accepted by other judges in this jurisdiction previously.
Right, and the Daubert standard, was expanded, and in particular in this case, it's not really scientific knowledge, right? This is the gang validation tool that falls into the bucket of specialized knowledge based on patterns, based on observations that occur, right?
That's correct. Previously in Maryland, it was under the Fry-Reed analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Then we recently changed under the Roshkind case, so we call it Daubert-Roshkind, to the analysis that we are at today. And you're correct about the analyzation of the potential testimony being basically like the other category. And that was the focus of the argument in our case. And again, it has been tested in the past with different judges. But, this is just one of the things that we're dealing with, amongst other things, when it comes to prosecuting these very serious cases.
And in the different jurisdictions because gang prosecutions are not unique to Maryland or to Montgomery County, right? So within the State's Attorneys Association in Maryland, I'm assuming there have been conversations about the applicability of the Fry-Roshkind standard, or Daubert, however you want to, what we're doing now with expert witness testimony in Maryland. And whether this is trending in other jurisdictions where they are becoming more fine-tuned about what they're accepting as a proffer and the extent of what the expert would be permitted to testify on. Could you speak to that a little bit?
So my basic exposure has been from attending the margin training that's provided once a year, and you speak to other jurisdictions there. To be honest, I think our office is fairly ambitious when it comes to charging, but that is because of what we're dealing with in this county when it comes to violence and gangs. All over the county, but mainly in the districts that were cited before, it's a big deal. And when you have the potential of going forward on a participation in a criminal organization charge that could potentially expose someone to additional incarceration and very serious violent offenses, we are trying to use every tool that we have at our disposal to protect the people in this county. And I would say directly, I have not met with other prosecutors that could definitively tell me how they attempt to introduce that evidence into trials in their jurisdiction.
Do you rely on gang validation that was provided by other jurisdictions?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Okay. Do you routinely check with other jurisdictions or with the MCAC, for example, on whether or not an individual has been identified as a gang member or gang associate in another jurisdiction?
I believe our initial gang intelligence comes through our policing arm, and we rely on the information from our policing arm.
And Captain Clark, do you have anything to add to that?
So, approximately once a month, I meet with a Maryland Intel group for high-level discussions about what's going on across the state, what patterns are we seeing, and with that, it's not just gangs; it's violent,
Right.
violent crime,
Right.
guns, drugs. Because, as we know, crime does not stop at the Montgomery County border.
Right. Yeah, my understanding is that this type of work, particularly with gangs, but with other types of crime, it's cross-jurisdictional, it's complex, and it does require collaborations amongst different stakeholders who are invested in these processes, whether it's our state and federal partners, our other local law enforcement departments. And you did speak to, of course, MCPS and our street outreach network. Could you comment on the collaboration you are or are not receiving through MCPS and the street outreach network with respect to these investigations?
We have a very good working relationship. Like I said, with MCPS, our gang detectives did a training presentation last year for all security personnel. And the Street Outreach Network under HHS is very proactive in the community, trying to prevent individuals from obviously joining a gang or participating in a gang. And I know my detectives have a good, positive relationship with some of the employees of Street Outreach Network.
I know that all school resource officers, or as we call them, community engagement officers, as well as school security employees across the state, are required to have a mandated training, which also includes a substantial block on dealing with gangs in schools, right? Because again, they are students. They are required to receive their education. And so then the question is, how do you manage that based on understanding the dynamic of gang membership, what is required to advance your position in the gang, et cetera, in order to change your course or change your tactics for how you would manage them, as opposed to, a dust up between two students that's your run-of-the-mill high school conflict. And is that part of the training that you all do?
Yeah, and part of it is having that positive collaboration where the interaction that our detectives have with MCPS employees or school security, information sharing, so we don't get involved. It's that prevention stage that if we can identify somebody early on to prevent them, and we can share that information with MCPS, and it's been a very positive process.
In terms of other jurisdictions, places like Los Angeles, New York City, Chicago, and those jurisdictions used a different expert standard than what Maryland law had for a very long time, because Fry-Reed was the law of the land for a very, very long time. So there's probably substantially more case law available in those jurisdictions to rely upon. But I would be curious to know, I've never looked myself, but I would be curious to know what other major metropolitan areas have found works or didn't in terms of that. And I do think that with respect to Judge Chernovsky's ruling and the peer review aspect of it, that certainly it seems that the intention is that someone higher up than the individual who did the initial validation should be the one who is conducting that review in order for it to meet that standard. So is that the practice that you all are engaging in now, right?
Yeah, we can certainly look into what other major jurisdictions do for their validation process. And to be fair, maybe my detectives have looked into it. I don't have that knowledge right now.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I do think it should be, and I know Councilmember Mink has one more question, she said, but I do think it's necessary to mention that the reason the gang, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason the gang validation is so important is because if gang participation, which is a felony with penalties up to 25 years in prison, and a $5 million in fines, it can lead to, if someone is a gang member, it can lead to a more stringent or a more difficult sentence for them. Is that fair? I mean, because if someone is, does the horrible thing of committing a murder, they still could be guilty of committing that murder whether they were or were not in a gang.
Yeah, yes, sir, that's correct. Under criminal law article section 9804, if the act results in death, they could be subjected to a maximum 25-year sentence that it could be separate and consecutive. And whether it is separate and consecutive is a determination made by the judge at the time of sentencing.
Thank you. Councilmember Mink.
And my understanding also is that in Montgomery County that gang affiliation and or membership is one of the criteria for DOCR to honor a detainer for ICE. And so, which adds, of course, another layer of the importance of getting this right, in either direction. And to the question of whether, the alignment of DOCR standards versus MCPD, and the reference made to the Ingersoll case by Judge Chernovsky, who noted under, whether, in reference to the question of whether the theory or technique is generally accepted, noted that there is a difference across agencies, including, between MCPD and DOCR. And if there was, so from my understanding of that would be that if there is alignment there, then that might be an indicator that the theory or technique is generally accepted. But the judge notes some differences there. So is that one of the ways in which MCPD is looking to potentially address some of the concerns, alignment with DOCR standards?
So I can't speak for what process DOCR does, but that is certainly something that we can look into.
Okay, that seems like an important question as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Frog, did you have anything else in this packet?
I do not.
Thank you. Thank you all very, very much for being with us this morning for that topic. And we're going to go to the next topic, which is an update on the 911 Emergency Communication Center. Anyone who's associated with this panel, if you could please come on down. Everybody? If you all could please, and the chief has already introduced himself. I recognize him, so and the assistant chief. If you could please identify yourself for us.
Sure, I'm Jen Reedy. I'm the director of the Emergency Communications Center.
And Lieutenant Cody Fields, the executive officer for our Management Services Bureau.
Thank you very much. Do either of you have any opening statements?
I do have something.
You do? Okay.
Yes. All right. I just want to say good morning, council members. I'm happy to be here and given the opportunity to tell you about the 911 Center that I've gotten to know over the last 6 months and update you on its progress and the direction we're headed. As someone who came from another 911 center in the region, I'm happy to confirm something you probably already knew, which is that our center has a great foundation. Structurally, it has the support it needs in the areas of IT, training, and quality assurance, as well as an impressive supervisory structure that few centers have. It has systems in place that prioritize 911 calls over non-emergency calls, which is essential in a call center that handles the volume of calls that we do. We have well-trained and knowledgeable staff and good relationships with nearby centers. We're lucky to have the support of the council, the police and fire departments, and the Maryland 911 Board. The greatest struggle we face, which is mirrored by nearly all 911 centers in the nation, is having enough staff to manage the call volume that comes into our center. This was a struggle that was highlighted in last year's ECC update and has been ongoing for years before that. Staffing has affected every aspect of our center, our ability to consolidate, our wait times during our busiest hours, our ability to train, and our mandatory holdovers, which impact quality of work and morale within our center. We've gotten better over the last year. We currently have 25 trainees in various stages of training and only 19 vacancies remaining. Our mandatory holdovers have gone down significantly. With a new academy of 12 starting in November, our vacancies will be reduced to 7 based on our authorized staffing of 171. With our next class in January 2026, we anticipate filling all of our vacancies and needing to begin filling some of those positions that were previously withheld from the budget. If we continue to get classes of 12 like we hope, we anticipate being fully staffed by July of 2026, filling staffing up to 198. At those staffing levels, we anticipate our wait times will go down significantly and we'll be able to complete the process of consolidation. Outside of staffing and consolidation, the most impactful area of focus for me for the next year is the opportunity to use technology to offload some of the workload for our non-emergency calls. While 311 helps greatly with diverting routine questions from our 911 center, our non-emergency call volume is still about 40 to 50% of our call volume. The technology has advanced recently in such a way that several vendors now offer technology that uses AI to screen non-emergency calls and either answer those questions directly or reroute those calls to where they need to go without intervention from a call taker. The technology can also handle the hundreds of 911 hangups we get every day due to cell phones without call taker intervention. We're in the process of determining which service would best serve Montgomery County, and with funding from the 911 board, we plan to implement this technology in the next year. We hope that this, paired with increased staffing and implementing more efficient schedules for our specialists, will move us closer to the goal of being able to answer 911 calls with 0 wait time.
Very good, thank you. I did want to point out that we do have Chief, I'm going to get his name wrong, but it's Beltrosky is in the audience. I got a head shake, so I'm close. At least he knew who I was talking about. And Chief Bailey and Chief Smedley were here. I don't know whether they're in the hallway, but they were here as well. And with that, I'm going to turn to Ms. Frog.
Good morning again. Director Reedy Hall went through most of the salient points within my packet to provide those updates. I would just provide a little context for those who might be listening at home, because the committee is already well aware of this. The Emergency Communications Center has been deeply stressed by understaffing for several years. It's been continuous, and it was getting worse for a while. It had up to a 41% vacancy of the public safety emergency communications specialists at one point. Those are the people that do both the call taking and the call dispatching. That has decreased now to just about 14%, as Director Reedy Hall had pointed out. I do want to put, my caution for this is that 25 positions had been abolished to identify some savings for the police department budget overall. So it's kind of an artificial reduction. However, it's absolutely true that the director has increased hiring and is getting these positions filled. One of the key questions is, what is the appropriate number of staff and configuration for the Emergency Communications Center? Once she gets that ramped up into next year, hopefully, better assess, operations and identify any other types of needs. It would be helpful to get that type of update next year moving forward. Part of getting all of these positions filled would help civilianize the fire dispatch function. It would be helpful to better understand what that might look like right now. Right now you have career firefighters on, I believe there's like 43 assigned to the Emergency Communications Center. I think the long-term goal is to have them deployed back to the field to help with fire operations and have those positions civilianized. Internally, what will that look like? And they would also have a fire liaison who remains on site in the Emergency Communications Center. The ECC used to be a joint venture between the fire and the police department as part of the consolidation effort that's been ongoing for about 10 years now. It was shifted under the police department, and all civilian positions are now in the police department budget. The one outstanding piece that I did want to just touch on is the physical plant and the physical space needs. There is a primary emergency communications center and there's a backup alternate communications center. They are supposed to function identically. Staff do train at both sites so that they stay familiar with the equipment and the layout, but neither site really has the physical space necessary to provide optimal functions, optimal operations. One of the things that we had talked about offline is training needs, the training rooms, whether or not they have enough room for all the huge equipment that people use. Director Reedy Hall has identified this as a need. It has been repeatedly identified as a need in a variety of studies and assessments that the county has done. And the Alternative Emergency Communication Center, again, which is the backup, is in the CIP under facilities planning. We should get an update on that as part of the full CIP review in January. But neither space really is optimal for operations at this point. So it would be helpful to better understand moving forward what their needs are and how we can address those.
Thank you very much. Let me just say very publicly, Director, welcome to Montgomery County, and thank you for doing what you're doing. And also to Lieutenant Fields, I could do that, though he's been here longer than you have, and the other people on the panel as well. But, I guess it's been several months ago now that we went over and visited at the ECC, and how in the world the people who work in the Emergency Communications Center can do their job so efficiently and so effectively, and during a time when, in some cases, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to a person or to their families, and you know that they're excited, and you know that they're speaking fast, and not necessarily, and depending on the language and depending on the accent, how you can do it and save lives so many times a day, probably so many times an hour, is just amazing, and we sincerely appreciate it. It's in Montgomery County especially, we take it for granted that somebody calls 911 and they're going to have their life saved or their loved one's life saved, and we take that, we shouldn't, because we know you don't have to go too far in other jurisdictions to find where that's not always the case. And that doesn't mean that every now and then we don't have somebody that say you didn't do it this way correctly, and I felt at risk, et cetera, et cetera. And we've actually, my office has called or emailed the director, and you followed through on it, because I guess we've said time and time again, if somebody makes a mistake, though as much as we don't want to, you need to learn from that mistake, and that's what we've been able to do. I'm glad to see, according to the packet, that we now have the highest starting pay among the surrounding jurisdictions. I'm glad to, as was pointed out, about the retention rates as well. I mean, it's a burnout position. I mean, but I do think that you have certainly brought an awareness back to us. We had it all along, but you've added to our awareness on what we need and how we need to get there. This council, this committee, along with the rest of the council, has added to some benefits to make certain that not only do we attract people, that we keep people. And so I think that's so very necessary. And I'll turn to you first. I turned to her first last time. I love all my children. I want that to be me.
I love that you refer to me as your child.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I am delighted to hear about the incoming classes, and that's a problem I think we all want to have here at the council. Like, if you need more people, we're good with that, right? And I certainly am happy with the progress that we've made with making sure that your salaries and benefits and pensions are the best that we can offer, and make sure that folks who are working in the ECC are treated as professionals. It is a very stressful job, and as I noted when we were there, you don't get closure. Right. Yeah. You don't, so you know a thing has happened, but you don't know how it's resolved. It's like that always hanging unresolved chord at the end of a song, right? It feels off and unnatural, and that's challenging. Not everyone can deal with that. And so, the fact that your staff has mechanisms for positively addressing that to move on to the next call is important. And I know that that is a focus of, the management and the work inside the ECC. So thank you for that. I don't have any questions. I'm just glad to hear that things are moving along so well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mink.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Glad to get the good report, and the multiple times that I've been through there, it's obviously it's a very high stress environment, and there's also a lot of work and effort being put into trying to provide appropriate support, and including not just on the how many staff do we have here, but consideration where possible about mental health and wellness. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It's a big, as Ms. Ludke was speaking of, that inability to get closure on a call is very challenging. And then the second piece that is also very challenging for them is they could have a call where they are doing CPR, and then 2 minutes later get a call for a burglary, and then 2 minutes later get a call for just a simple question about what's happening in the county or whether the park is open. And they're expected to go from one call to another call to another call with very little time in between. And that's where staffing comes into play as well. So sometimes we forget about the downtime that's necessary for all of our specialists after they've handled a certain type of call. So it's staffing, and it's the support, the mental health support that they can go and get in between calls when they need that break, the very necessary break. We sometimes forget to just factor in necessary downtime for mental health. We're very lucky to have a social worker within the ECC that is dedicated to the ECC and available to them 24/7 as needed. And she is absolutely willing to answer that phone call when it's necessary. So that was one of the considerations when it comes to looking at space. There are some incredible 911 centers nationwide that have absolutely focused on mental health and having relaxation rooms and decompression rooms, and focused on lighting and music and just a place where you can go and relax after you've potentially saved someone's life or lost someone on the phone. It's very difficult because the response time, and having been law enforcement for 24 years, as a law enforcement officer, we get the call over the radio, and then 10 minutes later generally is when we're arriving, and we have all that time to prepare. A 911 specialist doesn't know when they pick up the phone what it is that they're getting, and they have zero time to prepare, and they're the lifeline for that person for the next 10 minutes until those first responders arrive. So true first responders they are, and they deserve all of the same mental health treatments that are available to first responders.
And benefits and all of that,
All of
which I
that,
know
absolutely.
has been a focus as well, and really important. Thank you for highlighting that. And, I think as we, there's going to be, of course, budgetary and other related decisions. And I think it's just so important to remember everything that you just said and to have that highlighted. That type of investment also pays dividends when we look at not just of course, the wellness of an individual person, but the quality of the work that everyone is able to do, retention, all of those pieces. It's also an investment there as well. Absolutely. So thank you for that. I know that another piece that has been looked at is our frequent flyers, the regular callers, folks who are calling to chat, and working to find other ways to accommodate them so that they're not calling 911, and so that we don't have to end up sending somebody there and all of those pieces. Can you talk a little bit about that body of work? I think that there were some conversations about, if we can funnel them to another number. But yeah, if you could speak to that.
So first, we are actively working with both 988 and the Crisis Center.
Great.
We have regular meetings with them to talk about how we can offload some of those frequent callers that don't require police or medical EMS fire services to respond out, that might have a lesser intrusive, more appropriate response coming to them, whether it's by phone or by our crisis teams responding out. So that's the first start, is trying to develop an MOU with 988 and Crisis Services to get those policies in place, those procedures in place, the liability concerns that exist with passing someone off who is called 911 and transferring them over to 988 is always going to be a concern. So getting those things in black and white and written, and then training our staff to know when the right call can go over there, and then making sure that there are procedures in place to transfer them back if 988 or the crisis center says, you know what, we can't help this person, or they're not willing to create a safety plan, or whatever it is, they can transfer them back to us and we can send units out. And then Lieutenant Fields, actually, I'm gonna call on you for this because we were just recently discussing our frequent flyers and coming up with a way to better address some of those calls.
Great.
Thank you, Director Reedy. One of the initiatives that we are just now in the baby steps of looking into is identifying, and Director Reedy and I kind of set the top 100 911 callers. And once we get data in, we may be able to parse that down to fewer, maybe the top 50, depending on how many individuals call or how many calls they actually give each year. But in order to do that is to assess what their needs are and identify that the needs aren't necessarily public safety related. But in order to do that is to identify what they actually need, whether that's landlord-tenant affairs, whether it's something that's a civil matter and not necessarily an armed response appropriate, or if it's mental health services. And if we can identify the categories of calls that tie up a significant amount of the 911 calls that come into our center, the end goal is to reduce the time that people have to spend on hold, but it's to bring in the other county resources and the resources available with partnerships, and to expand our scope in order to provide wellness services or services to those individuals and reduce the amount of times that they have to call either 911 or depend on departmental resources. So this is in the early stages. We're looking forward to evaluating that and then hopefully reporting back on the successes.
Great, super important work, and hopefully will really help to alleviate some of the, I don't know percentage-wise, but anecdotally, I know we've certainly heard that is that can be a significant body of time, and some of it, of course, comes in waves. We have heard about how, especially at the beginning of the school year, there could be a lot of parents calling and saying, my kids don't want to go to school. And probably our police don't need to be the ones who are responding to that call, but it sounds like some support from another department would probably be useful there. So it's great to hear about that work, and look forward to hearing updates as you have them. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Farag, please.
I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. The council periodically receives complaints about people not answering the phone when they call 911, or if they do answer, sometimes they're put on hold for what feels like a really extended period of time. The ECC has answered most calls between, or 75 to 85% of all calls within 15 seconds, and another 2.5% calls within 20 seconds. They advise that approximately 13 to 23% of all calls are answered after waiting 20 seconds or more, and they've conducted a time analysis where they see most of these calls are coming in between 4 and 5 p.m., where there could be a 35-second answer delay. The other piece is being placed on hold, and in fiscal 24, about 24% of calls to the queue were on hold for about 11 seconds. Director Reedy Hall has mentioned some of the changes that she's going to make, but it would be helpful to understand moving forward how staffing changes might help alleviate some of these pressure points in the system.
If you could please answer that. And when you're saying 15 seconds or whatever, is that counting the time that the phone is ringing, or is that from the time that it's been answered? How does that work? What is the time clock on that?
It's from the time it is received into the 911 center by our Vesta system, which is our call handling system, to the time it's picked up by a call taker.
So the phone is still ringing, and you're counting that time, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And if you could answer the other part, please.
Sure, absolutely. So give me 1 second. So we're really looking at these wait times, and we're attacking them in 3 different ways. The first way that we can do most immediately, and that we're doing right now, is by adjusting our staffing during certain times of the day. So as she mentioned, between 9 a.m. and 11 p.m. is our busiest call time. And you can imagine that looks very much like a bell curve. So around 1 p.m., 2 p.m. is our busiest call time. Because of 12-hour shifts and the way they work, generally you have pretty consistent staffing throughout the entire day. But realistically, that's not what the bell curve looks like for call volume. Mm-hmm. So what we're actually doing is we're changing our shifts up with this next incoming shift pick that will go into effect. We're having it in October, but they actually go into effect in February. And what we're doing is adding 10-hour shifts during the day specifically. So 10-hour shifts from 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. and then a separate 10-hour shifts from 1 p.m. to 11 p.m. So there will be significant overlap of those specialists working, especially between 1 and 7. We'll have double of those 10-hour shifts. Plus we'll have those 10-hour people working starting at 9 and ending at 11. So that will be on top of the normal 12-hour shift. So it just provides an additional 6 people during the middle of the day when that call volume is high. Simply because we don't need necessarily 22 people at 3 a.m. Where we need those people is 2 p.m. So we're making those adjustments with what's coming up right now. The second way is using the technology, AI, that I mentioned. There are several vendors out there right now and other 911 centers that have gone through the 911 board to secure funding to have certain vendors come in, and what they do is basically act as an AI phone tree. And you can teach it very similar to our 311. And the person talks to AI and asks the question, and those can get fielded either rerouted directly to a call taker if necessary, depending on what's said, or it could be routed to the Public Information Office or the Water Sewer Division, things like that. So that's one way to try to offload some of those non-emergency calls. And then the last way, obviously, is staffing, right, which takes time, and training takes a year to a year and a half. So that's sort of a long-term goal, but those are the 3 ways that we're attacking those.
And I know Councilmember Minkus, but let me just, so if there's an emergency on 270,
Yes.
Everybody has a cell phone, everybody has to call right away, which you want to know about it.
We do.
So you have 100 calls within 2 minutes.
Yes.
Is there a way that AI or somebody can help us out there?
There is, that's what we're all exploring right now. It's sort of uncharted territory. What we can see is where the calls are coming in. So you can see if you have a bunch of calls coming in at that area on 270, those are likely related to that call. But the one that's 5 miles away, right,
Right.
might be something very different. So we're looking at how we can use AI to cherry pick those calls that are not related to that. There's also ways that AI, when you get a large volume of calls like that all at once, there's actually a way that AI can, when it goes into the queue, it says we have, it will tell the caller, we have a significant incident at this location. A call's already been entered. Do you have any additional information?
Yeah.
And if they say no, or if they press, whatever it is we tell them to press, and then it'll ask, do you want to call back? And if they say no, then we don't have to answer that call, and that's one less call that we have to handle.
Good. Please.
That makes a lot of sense. That's great. So I would guess that a lot of the new hires are related to the difficulties in the job market, and I know that we are, of course, as a county, as folks are unfortunately losing jobs as federal employees and contractors, and we want to give as many folks a home, of course, within county government as we're able to do and as makes sense to do. But could you speak a little bit about where the new recruits are coming from and any patterns you're seeing there?
Sure. We've made a few changes in the last few years that I've been made aware of, specifically with our hiring platform that apparently has a greater reach than our previous platform did. We also have the signing bonus that has been great at getting people's attention. And when you're comparing,
It's 5,000.
5,000, yes. And when you're comparing Howard County to Montgomery County to Prince George's County, and you're looking for something within 45 minutes, right, of a time to get to work, and only one of them has a $5,000 signing bonus, you're going to be looking at that one a little bit harder than the rest of them. So we believe that has definitely impacted that, and obviously the job market, the struggles that are there, and trying to come in. A lot of people in federal jobs that are no longer working federal are public safety minded type of people, right? Public service type of people. And those are the people that are looking to do this job, because this job, just like police and fire, are those jobs where it absolutely has to be worth it, right? Because there are struggles that come with the position, and there are sacrifices that come with being in public safety. And you have to be willing, you have to have a calling to those things in order to be willing to give up those things. So unfortunately for the current federal situation, I'm glad that we do have an opportunity for them to find something else in public safety, where they can come and receive those same personal benefits.
Thank you.
Ms. Frog, was there anything else?
That's all.
Anything else from you all? If not, we're going to thank you very much. I know
Thank
this
you.
is, it's very important for us to get an update, and we sincerely appreciate it. And there again, we always like to remind, and I know during budgets, we also hear this, but if there's other resources that we can be of assistance, we want everybody to be safe. We want everybody who's answering the phones to be able to have the resources necessary to be able to do it effectively.
Thank
So
you.
with that, we thank you very much. We are adjourned.